this is a video everyone has already done. But I think I made a unique observation and got a couple unique responses. Also, I feel like doing it, so fuck it.
Atheists.
Oh, we'll get to it.
Thanks for clicking on this video. It means a lot to me, really.
It means a lot to you. Is that why you didn't react to a single reply? Not just of me, but anyone as far as I've been able to tell. If you were interested in other people, you might react in any way to them when they answer you. So, I guess I'm unconvinced that it means anything to you. You run ads, however, so I can see a different motivation.
I'm a religious guy who's devoted my life to a God you don't believe in, so you're taking a bit of a risk here that I might insult you.
Like talking to me like I'm fucking 5? Yeah, that would be pretty insulting. But you wouldn't do that, right?
Make you feel bad about your life, or at the very least, waste your time.
Waste my time by, for instance, not cutting out you walking on stage. I'm going to go on a bit of a rant. Timestamp on screen to skip it. Allow me to analyze the options. So here's the original.
Atheists.
Near 10 seconds long of stuff no one finds interesting. That's over twice as long as my intro, which includes a bit of bad but unique music, my logo, and the bit of movement that I made that tells you something about at least one of the things I like. It's not good, but it's uniquely mine. And once more, it's shorter. But also, let's look at some other options. How about a simple fade from black? 1 second transition. Also, let's fade in the audio so it comes in gradually.
Atheists.
Or if you want to go thematical, you could fade from white. Really include the sun god that Christianity included more of since at least the Gothic period. Which is why they wanted to get as much light into the churches as they could. Though I would advise against it. It's a very bright opening not reflected in the rest of the video.
Atheists.
Or, since you find the Bible probably pretty important, you could start with a Bible quote for maybe 1.5 seconds and then fade into you.
Atheists.
Or you could do it like many of your videos and just start at the start.
Atheists.
Yes, normally his videos just start.
As humans, we sure do care about our bodies, don't we? A few years ago, I found myself struggling with a couple habitual sins. Last week, I opened up my Twitter to find that, of all things, he is risen, alleluia. Happy Easter, everyone. I hope...
Which is interesting, don't you think? He deliberately wastes time in the video that talks about not wasting your time. I have to question why. I'm not saying he is just mocking people. I have no reason to say it. But if I was going to mock people, this would be a way I would do it.
I really do appreciate it, and I hope not to do any of those things here. Rather, I'd like to pose a question to you. It's a very simple question, in fact. It is more of an exhortation from me to you.
Exhortation. An address or a communication empathetically arguing someone to do something. You could just say you want people to do something. But fine, go ahead.
This question is not meant to trick you or convert you. I don't have some super ingenious question that will somehow inspire faith in a deity, as much as I'd love to.
Why? Why would you love to? Do you think God hasn't properly revealed himself to people? Do you think a God will do something bad to people who've not been convinced? You see, I for instance believe in aliens. Not people abducting aliens, just life on other planets. But I don't feel the need to convince other people of this, even though I think I have some good reasons for it. It's not even like you say you would want a good conversation. You'd want to convince people a God exists. I have to wonder why, as I feel it'll tell a lot.
I'd rather just like to challenge you. You say that you're an atheist, that you don't believe in gods, and I just want to know one thing. Are you a good one? Are you a good atheist?
Here is my thesis for this video. You can't be a good atheist. And since you can't be a good atheist, I'm not a good atheist. We'll discuss how this works later.
It's a question that I ask with two things in mind. The first being related to morality.
What morality are we talking about? Is this something like humanist morality, where something is good by lowering the amount of suffering in the world and increasing the amount of pleasure? Or is it akin to Christian morality, where something is good by being in accordance to what some powerful dude likes? Are we talking societal morality, where it exists because humans who have ideas on morality exist? Or is it more like moral universalism, where morality exists like atoms do, not just ideas? Since no clarification is given, I'll work with moral nihilism, as in good and bad don't exist. People just call things good and bad based on preference. And humanist morality, as in people prefer lowering the amount of suffering and larger amounts of pleasure.
While religion in general, and Christianity in particular, doesn't necessarily make someone a moral person, these ways of life do necessarily demand morality of adherence.
No, they don't. A religion requires you to fall enough in line with the rest. Falling enough in line doesn't have to be bad. This can be a moral line. Not harming others can be what you need to do to fall in line, so the religion considers you part of it. But things like gender inequality, witch burnings, war, for instance the Crusades, slavery, etc., condoned by many religions, show that you don't have to be moral to be part of a religion. Often, not being moral helps you fall enough in line. Argue that women are just as qualified to teach the Bible, and many religious folk will argue with this most basic form of equality.
There is a particular code of life that one must live. In the case of Catholic Christianity, that code is one of peace and justice, mercy and forgiveness.
Did Galileo Galilei think the Catholic Church was just for imprisoning him in his house for the crime of learning how the world actually works? How about the modern victims of priests who abuse their power in the most horrific ways, who are not put in prisons but instead protected from what we call justice? Was the Catholic Church not the one promoting the Crusades? And what was their position on the Third Reich again? It's very easy to claim peace and justice. Everyone does and did it. The Romans, for instance, never started a war. No, how barbaric. They simply always acted preemptively to prevent others from making war on them. And somehow, this ended with them having a huge empire. If only not everyone was going to attack them, they wouldn't have had to conquer them to prevent them being attacked. The church is doing the exact same, saying they are peaceful without the effort of actually being peaceful.
It's a code that seeks to care for the poor and seek reparations for those who take advantage of the vulnerable.
What percentage of wealth the church has goes to the poor? What percentage goes to themselves? How many poor are allowed to sleep in your church every night, shielded from rain and wind? It's easy to claim the moral high ground, which is what he is doing, even if he wouldn't say it. But it's actually hard to put in the effort, isn't it?
Now, Lord knows we don't always live up to our founder and have actually done some pretty atrocious things through the years.
Yeah, you can say that again.
But it is our faith that at least informs us when we do these things and gives us and reminds us a moral code to live by.
So your faith informed the church when they imprisoned Galileo Galilei and supported the Third Reich. And this is good. How?
Reminds us that it's not an option. We must strive to be good people.
Except that faith doesn't seem to help you in doing any good.
Now, as someone who doesn't have this foundation...
What foundation? The way I use the word morality is that it's what people prefer. I have the foundation that I want to do what people prefer because I am people. Saying we don't have this foundation only makes sense if good is rooted in God. But then there is no reason to think good exists. And there's no reason to care about if we are good. And instead, we should care if we are behaving in a way people prefer. And we are back at my morality.
Who doesn't believe in a god or adhere to a religion, there is no superstructure making this demand on your life.
There is a far more powerful structure that demands that I do that which I see as good. Yes, far stronger than God. My brain. A god, if they existed, might influence me. But my brain is me, and my brain forces me to behave in the way that I prefer. Thus, the thing that makes me me is also the thing that makes me behave in the way that I find moral.
No one telling you how to live in certain situations.
My brain and the society I grew up in told me how to act in certain situations. Both of those can be proven to exist. You seem to just think someone is telling you something without justification.
Without a belief in an afterlife, there might be a feeling that all the world is futile, so what difference does it make?
I, and everyone else, only gets one life. There are no do-overs, this is it. The one chance to enjoy life. What difference does it make? My actions will influence people's one life. It means everything. How do my actions matter if there's an afterlife? Sure, I said something that makes someone feel bad for a week. That's nothing to the eternity of the afterlife. My abuse of power might leave someone scarred for life, but what's one lifetime when there is an afterlife? My negligence might kill someone, but that's a good thing. It means they get a better afterlife faster. Our actions matter a lot because we only have one life. It doesn't make life futile. That type of thinking has to be taught to you. I don't think a person gets there on their own.
This, of course, does not need to be the case. Some of the world's greatest humanitarians, some of the most influential figures today promoting peace and justice efforts, are not adherents to a religion, but live morally out of a commitment to humanity, a recognition of our interconnectedness, an acknowledgement that there is something good in itself about loving one another, about sacrifice.
No, there isn't something intrinsically good about loving one another. But people prefer to feel good. Acting lovingly is one way to make people feel better. Treat others like you would have them treat you and all that. And of course, Many people feel good when they help others. We are a social species after all. For them, selfishly going after a feeling of satisfaction is an act of helping others. And sacrifice isn't good in and of itself. I can sacrifice a lot. But if that sacrifice doesn't help anyone, then what's good about it? A sacrifice is good when it reduces the pleasure for one person, but also lowers the suffering of another, as a reduction in suffering is more important than an increase in pleasure. But of course, a Christian wants to make sacrifice itself good. That way they can say that Jesus' worthless death on the cross was a good thing.
And so I ask you, are you a good atheist?
To ask me if I'm a good atheist in a moral sense is as logical as to ask me if I'm a good gamer, a good dungeon master, or a good autist. The two have nothing to do with one another. I try to be good. I try to decrease the amount of suffering and increase the amount of pleasure in the world. But this wouldn't make me a good atheist. It would make me a good person who happens to be an atheist. Just like I happen to be a gamer, a dungeon master, an autist.
Even though there may be no eternal reward or punishment, even though you're free to do whatever you want, do you choose the virtuous path that benefits not only you, but others?
When I do good, when I help someone else while I get nothing out of it, it is a selfless act. When someone who believes in eternal punishment or reward does it, it can't be selfless, as that person expects to be rewarded for it. Your religion prevents you from acting selflessly. A barrier I don't have. In a way, I can be better than you can be.
I hope so. The world needs good atheists. Now, of course, the word good points to more than just a sense of morality. It also represents an evaluation of aptitude. When I ask if you're a good atheist, I want to know if you're good at being an atheist.
Before I answer this question, I need to clarify some definitions and ask you a question. Now, I work with a simple definition of theist and atheist. A theist is simply someone who believes in one or more gods. If you believe in one god, you're a theist. If you believe in 18 gods, you're also a theist. An atheist is someone who is not a theist. If the answer to how many gods you believe in is above 0, you are a theist. If it is not, then you're an atheist. Now, you see, I play this game called Dauntless. You probably haven't heard of it. It's kind of like a faster and partially simpler version of Monster Hunter. Now, I presume that you don't play it. But are you good at not playing it? How good of a non-Dauntless player are you? What's that? You can't be good at not doing something? But I'm not believing in one or more gods. If you can't be good at not playing Dauntless, how can I be good at not believing in any gods?
Do you articulate why you don't believe in God in a coherent way, or you just think that religion's dumb, so use logical fallacies?
I can explain why religious arguments don't work. Got quite a number of videos on my channel, in fact. While I think every religion I'm aware of is dumb in at least certain ways, if not all, I don't argue with fallacies. I argue with arguments. This has nothing to do with being an atheist. I don't need to be an atheist to explain the problems with the Trinity. Pagans also do that. I don't need to be an atheist to explain why young Earth creationism doesn't work. Christians also do that. what you're talking about is counter-apologetics, not atheism.
Have you explored the depths of your mind and heart, asking the real questions of life, of death, faith and reason, seeking to understand what this human life is really about? You just not want to go to church, so this'll do.
I'm somewhat of an armchair philosopher, which means I'm endlessly annoying in conversations because I think too deep about everything. I go for walks where I think about some of those basic philosophy things. Life and death, of course, are simply biological functions. I thought about faith and came to the simple conclusion that I don't have it and I have no reason to want it. Reason? Well, that has been a bit more recent that I started thinking about that. Learning you are depressed and not just a bit down in the winter like everyone else does a good job of making you aware things may not be as simple as they seem. And that I need a good reason to think many of the things that I encounter as basic or normal. And what life is about? Nothing! We have our lives, and we have drives that keep life around. Because the forms of life that didn't have this drive stopped being around. We can give meanings to our lives ourselves, but it doesn't have that in and of itself. A purpose to life exists like morality exists, determined by people. Though the purpose of your life is determined by you, and only you, and no one else. And I love going to churches. Many of the most stunning buildings I have seen in my life. Though I don't need to listen to some twat spouting bad philosophy if they aren't interested in a dialogue.
Have you read the critical atheist thinkers of history? People like Nietzsche, Sartre, Feuerbach, Heidegger, people who really ask the challenging questions, who pose thoughtful insights of the world. Or just stick with people like Richard Dawkins, people who provide great sound bites for the cause, yippee, but do little to add anything to the world other than strawman arguments and divisiveness.
No, I haven't read some atheist thinkers, because those have no interest to me. And I don't waste time on that which I find boring. Have you read the documentation on C#, Entity Framework? Have you looked into good design patterns and why you should use them? How and why to use event handlers? Or do you just assume that other people will deal with that and stay in the dark on those basic principles? This is probably the biggest error this guy makes. He assumes everyone is interested in religion. Now, you might think, well, obviously, he's a priest. But no, it's not obvious. I play Dungeons and Dragons, and I don't assume everyone is interested in that. I'm a programmer in training, but I don't assume everyone looks into the same stuff I do. I make videos, but I don't assume everyone cares about how you do that. Which is why I explicitly gave a timestamp to jump past me talking about making the video. This is rooted in the very basic understanding that not everyone is you. Now, like I said just a bit ago, I recently started to realize how different people are. But I was still a kid when I realized not everyone was as interested in the things I liked as I am. I went a bit far and completely stopped talking, but that's beside the point. This priest doesn't understand not everyone cares about religion like he does. He lacks some very basic understanding of people. And that's an autist telling him that.
Have you read for yourself the works of real theologians?
Real theologians. AKA, no matter how many works you have read, you just haven't read the works from the real ones yet. So, they never have to admit that you have read their stuff. No, I haven't, because I've been given no reason to care about what they wrote. I'm dyslexic, thanks God, so reading takes a lot of energy. I got better things to do and to read. I still have to read up on the lore of the Medusa, blue and purple dragons, Kirin, tree ants, and the stars. I need to read up on when to use TPH, TPC, and TPT. And I already have at least 3 fictional stories I want to read. I have no read for you to add your dull suggestions to the list.
People articulating our beliefs in the best way we know how. Karl Rahner, John Henry Newman, Joseph Ratzinger, Augustine of Hippo, Henri de Lubac. Or do you stick with the simplicity of evangelical pastors from some rural anti-intellectual church?
Unlike your completely intellectual church, of course, which imprisoned Galileo Galilei. How many hundreds of years until the church apologized for that one again? No, I haven't read those folk because, like I said, I don't care about those writings. Nor have I been given a reason to care about those writings.
I ask all of this not to be accusatory, at least not overly accusatory, but to simply challenge you to go deeper in your thought. Simply declaring yourself an atheist and going about your life isn't enough.
Yes, it actually is enough. Just like declaring yourself not to be a programmer and never looking into it is enough. If you say that I and everyone needs to look into the thing you find interesting, religion, then you need to look into everything anyone finds interesting. For me, that would have to start with Dungeons and Dragons, programming, and My Little Pony. If you can't give a good reason to say everyone needs to look into your thing, but you won't have to look into what everyone else finds interesting, you have to admit that you are a hypocrite, expecting others to do what you won't.
Just as saying you're a Christian and never reading the Bible wouldn't be enough.
That depends on the type of Christian. But it's also a false analogy. Christianity is a thing. Atheism is not. It's a lack of a thing. It's like saying that if a football fan isn't a real football fan if they don't watch games or play themselves, that therefore people who aren't football fans aren't real not football fans if they don't protest against it. You can be not a football fan without being against football. You can be not a theist, aka an atheist, without giving a fuck about religion.
Ask more questions.
At present I got 34 question marks in just this script. And you want more? 35. You don't even reply to the questions posed in the comments of your video. Why would we ask questions to someone who doesn't answer them? 36. I guess that also relates to God.
Read more perspectives. Be able to articulate your understanding of the world with logic and reasoning that will actually add something to the world.
Or don't. Not every individual needs to. There are tons of effective ways to spend your days. Being able to explain the universe to most is not one of them. Make something useful, entertain people, provide those necessary services society can't live without. You can find the time to build a cohesive worldview if you find it interesting, but you don't need to. This goes for theists and atheists alike.
Because here's the thing. People of faith need you to be good atheists. We do. As a Christian, I don't want you to be a bad atheist with an unexplored mind just regurgitating fallacies. I want you to ask questions that we've never thought to answer.
So, if I direct you to my video on Did Judas do anything wrong? Or Christians should reject Christ? or Satan has stronger principles than God. You would watch them and respond to them. They'll be linked in the description, though I don't think you would actually be interested in those questions. It appears as if you only want to look like you care, without actually having to think about it.
I want you to be so smart that it challenges us to be smarter. As crazy as it sounds, I would much rather you be a good atheist than just an atheist.
Except that, like I said before, this has nothing to do with atheism. You talk about counter-apologetics. You can be an atheist and be good at counter-apologetics. Just like you can be an atheist and be good at riding a unicycle. Atheism and counter-apologetics have nothing to do with one another. Easily seen by the fact that many Christians are also good at counter-apologetics.
And so that is my humble message to you, from one believer to a non-believer. We may not agree on much, but that doesn't mean that we don't need each other or can't learn something from one another.
People need people. But there is no reason to think that people who believe in one or more gods are needed. People can learn from people. But there is no reason to think that one of these people believing in one or more gods adds anything to what can be learned. I hope you can see why I say that you can't be a good atheist. Atheism has no relationships with any of the things he says makes you a good atheist. You can be an atheist and also have good morals. You can be an atheist and also happen to be good at counter-apologetics. You can be an atheist and also happen to have a prosthetic. You can be an atheist and also happen to be great at juggling. They have nothing to do with one another, no matter how much this supposedly well-read atheist doesn't understand that. This has been Vinix, saying farewell.
Thank you.